Aloha and Salamat Jarin, a Syrian greeting meaning blessings. We are here today to talk about the Galactic Federation of Light, and more particularly about the ships of its fleet, and how those ships were chosen to be part of the First Contact fleet. Now, for those of you who do not know what the Galactic Federation of Light is, know that the Galactic Federation of Light is composed of over 200,000 member star nations, star leagues, and confederations that form and create the entire length and breadth of sentient life throughout this Milky Way galaxy. Now, less than 1/10 of those ships are involved at any one time in contributing personnel and ships to the Galactic Federation's First Contact fleet. The ships that we will discuss are those either well known to you or those who are playing an important part in carrying out this First Contact. Most of the ships to be described are from the various human star nations that will be a part of the initial mass landing operation. Now, these compose approximately 800 of the sentient human star nations and star leagues and confederations that are part of the Galactic Federation. Those not attached to the human star nation contingents are included only because of their importance to our preparing for the actual mass landing operation. Now, there is a 3-phase command system that is provided for. This system starts with the interstellar motherships that are in orbit or near this planet. Some of them are as far out as Pluto, Neptune, and the far aspects of our particular solar system. The second level are the command ships, or the atmospheric motherships, of which we will be describing a few also shortly. And then the third level are the scout ships themselves. And then there are some personnel, and these are the medical teams, and we'll be talking about them later, that actually land on the planet, cloak themselves, and take care of the particular processes required to help us with our various changes that we are going through. So let's begin to look at these different ships. So let's start, first of all, with the command ships. And as we do that, I'm then going to go and explain the 2 major command ships that we're going to be talking about with illustrations. And then I want to go into the Syrian ship, because I really feel that all the things that I went through in my childhood will help you to understand what they're about and the incredible wonders of who and what they are. Pleiadian atmospheric mothership. Now, the Pleiadian atmospheric mothership, as you'll see in the drawing, looks almost like a 3,000-foot-long cigar case or cigar itself. And it's rounded. The reason why it's rounded is that there are no points allowed or corners allowed in the ships because of the flow of plasma. And this would tend to inhibit it and cause problems with the plasma flow. So all these ships you will see are basically rounded, whether they're discs or pyramidal or triangular. They're all based on the same basic principle. Now, if you look at the ship, you will see what are called hangars on the sides of the ship. These are the entrances to the hangars. Now, they also are rounded. And even though the clearance you'll see on the drawing is very small, 50 feet here, it is for the most part done in a different way than we do. In other words, very rarely does a ship come in where the pilot guides it in. All these ships are living beings, and this is the first aspect that is different than our craft. They're all living beings. As a result, they feel themselves to be living beings in service with their crews. So when a ship, let's say a mothership, a command mothership, is here, and over here is the scout, and the scout is going to come into the mothership. What happens is the scout is guided in. It's similar to almost like an automatic landing, and so the ship, regardless of the clearance, will always land safely at the hangar. Now, another thing to remember about the atmospheric ships is they do mainly atmospheric research, this Pleiadian mothership that you're looking at right now. And what it will do is it will stay no further down than 10,000 or 30,000 feet. And it will be either in a cloaked position, and very rarely will it put itself in a position where it's not cloaked. But it can cloak itself instantaneously. And we'll explain how all that happens later. So these ships are going along, and there'll be about 5 to 10 major scout ships or more, depending on whether this has been set up as a sector command. If it has been, then there'll be up to 50 ships. But what these ships are doing is either atmospheric research, which is their prime aspect, or Earth research, which means they're looking at the different aspects of our planet, whether it's the mountains or inside the mountains, or etc. So this is the first part. Now that we've looked at Earth research with the Pleiadians, let's get a better idea of how this Pleiadian ship operates as far as its force field, which we've talked about. And this is the second illustration, which is called Pleiadian Atmospheric Mothership and Plasma Field. As it says here, the plasma field can extend as far as 3 miles from the ship's hull when it is in deep space. However, when it is in a planet's atmosphere, the plasma field can be as close as 200 yards from the hull. And if you look at the ship, you'll see when you're looking at it that what you're seeing is the two-step field. The front end of the field is the main aspect. This is the propulsion field, and this is the outer one, which encompasses the whole ship. And then there's an inner field. And this inner field is the inertialess plasma field of the ship. And that's the one that's the light green color. So this is how the ship operates. So they'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. Remember these two fields, the propulsion plasma field and the inertialess plasma field on the inside. And these occur on all the ships that we'll be looking at, and we'll explain that in more detail when we get to talking about propulsion. Now the next command ship we're going to be talking about is the next illustration, which is the Arcturian Mothership. Now the Arcturian Mothership is also 3,000 feet in diameter, but it's different. It's a lenticular or lens looking, like as you can see here in the diagram. Now on the top of the diagram you will see what looks like little seeds across the top. And what these are the hangar decks. Now in the Pleiadian ship, the hangar decks were in the middle of the ship. In the Arcturian ship, it's designed differently because the Arcturian ship is designed for a different purpose. It's designed primarily to be for the medical teams. So this is how it operates. On the top levels, which you can see in the diagram, it has portholes. And these portholes are a little bit bigger because the ship is a little bigger, the scouts, which we'll also be describing. And these scouts, in the same way as we just described with the Pleiadian ship, will go in directly, be guided in. Now let's look at the ship, and from it you'll get a better idea of what we're talking about. In the middle section of the lens, of the lenticular shape, are the main healing rooms of the ship. What happens here is the Galactic Federation medical teams will have healing circles and send energies out to different peoples or whole sections of people on the planet to help them adjust the various changes to their physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual bodies that are being integrated right now as part of the process to make us fully conscious. Now let's look at the part that I really enjoy the most, and that's the Syrian mothership itself. Now this is the interstellar ship. Now remember when we were looking at the command system, we talked about the interstellar ships, the atmospheric command ships or atmospheric motherships, and the scouts. So this is the topper, or the height, the highest level for command. Now these ships are huge. Since they're designed to go from one area to another in space, they will carry as many as 5 to 10 of these atmospheric ships that we've just been talking to you about, as well as many as 500 scouts. Now these ships, as I said, are huge. the ship that we're going to be describing is 300 miles or 480 kilometers in diameter. It's shaped, as you can see here in the illustration, called the Syrian mothership. It's shaped like a tadpole with a bulge in the middle. Now, the way it operates is the propulsion system is in the middle of the ship, operating up and down, and then the field is then put around the ship. Now, the important point about this ship is that it is made out of a special metal. This metal is a light metal, and I'm going to use a capital L for that, because the metal is a living metal. And when the ship is formed, the metal actually forms the hull, and it forms the various floors on the ship as well. So this is a very important aspect we have to understand about the ships, is, as I said, they are all living beings. Now, this being a living being, its computer system, which is an organic living computer system, acts very much like our brain. Ships have a personality, just like we do. Many ships even have their own names and look at themselves as being part of a fleet of living beings, almost like a clan. So fleets of ships, interstellar ships, look upon themselves as being families, clans. And so when they're together, they're very happy, and they have rituals they perform with each other, just as people do. So this is an important part of the ship. And this is a very unique thing that you discover. First thing you do when you go on the ship, you feel the energy of it. It welcomes you and it greets you. And it surrounds you with an amazing, incredible energy. This energy just makes you feel loving. And I cannot describe the love you feel when you're on these ships. It's amazing. So, as you feel this incredible loving energy, it just engulfs you. And even when you walk in the ship, you feel this energy wherever. And you also feel in your head the ship talking to you and telling you how much it loves and cares who and what you are. When I was taken up on the Syrian mothership, I would feel the loving energies that were a part of the ship and would communicate with me. And they would take me, that is Washta, who was my guide, and those around him would take me to a conference room. And you can see this in what is titled here in the illustration as the main conference hall. Now, in the hall, as throughout the ship, there was this wonderful light which came from the metal, this light metal made out of light. And it produced this wonderful light which lit up the room, but yet there was not any of the harshness you would have with lighting here. Even incandescent or phosphorescent light would not produce the same kind of almost non-bulb creating glow. It was even, in other words, all over the floors and the walls and the ceilings. And it illuminated, and there was hardly any shadows with it. It was not harsh at all. And all these rooms had curved walls. And in the case of the main conference hall, it was 20 feet tall and the size of a football field. And in the middle of it was this huge conference table with lots of chairs around it. And the unique part about these chairs was, once again, when you sat in them, you didn't feel like you were in a chair. You felt like you were in this marvelous, almost like a womb. It totally covered you up, and you could feel this energy right around you. And I would always feel this energy when you'd sit in the chairs, and you'd be so relaxed, and you'd feel this loving energy. And it was just incredible. And then the other incredible part was the technology that was above the table. 6 to 8 feet above the table, running its length, was this huge rod. And it seemed to be just lying there in the air like it was suspended on wires, but it wasn't. There were no wires in it. Unlike magicians when they do levitation and put rings around it, there was no trick involved. There was actually energy coming out of these rods which allowed them to levitate and stay 6 to 8 feet above you. Now, these were 3D projectors, and as a result, they could project another whole room, or if they were giving me a history lesson, they would be able to project that on top of this rod. And as a result of that, you would look at the picture and it would be complete. It would look just like they were human figures or whatever they were doing, and it would seem like you were looking through a huge window instead of looking up at this rod. And it would talk and it would interact with you when necessary. It was incredible. And I really enjoyed these. I spent hours doing this and just couldn't believe how wonderful it was. Now, not only did I have the chance to go to the conference rooms, but they allowed me to go to other parts of the ship. And one of the neat things about going through the ship was whenever you walked, you wouldn't feel your step on it. It would feel like you had like this perfect rubberized floor is the only thing that our technology could look at and see. And it would just hold your feet and you would feel perfectly lovingly supported with every step. And this was just incredible. And you'd feel it all the time. Now, one of the most incredible rooms to go into was the cargo holds. And I used to love to go down there for a couple of reasons. First of all, to see the operation of these holds. These holds were huge, and you can see it in the next illustration, which is called Inside the Great Ship. Now, these holds were up to 200 feet tall and the same size of a football field. So 300 to 400 feet around. Some of them were shaped like a pyramid. Others were shaped like rounded cubes. Others were shaped almost like circles, like a huge ball. And that was one of the neat things, was seeing the different shapes and sizes. Some were even as big as 2 football fields. Some were as big as 500 feet tall. But the average one that we would describe is the one pictured inside the Great Ship illustration that you're looking at. Now, all these shelves, amazing shelves, which would go up like skyscraper stories around you, were filled with equipment. And all this equipment was color-coded. Now, you might ask, how was this equipment brought into these different shelves and how was it accessed? Well, the group that did it were these robots or androids that took care of this whole process. And they were very telepathic, and they would talk to the ship's computer that way, or to people. And to give you an idea of the size of these things, you can see the people down on the bottom and the size of the robots. Now, these robots had special hands. They looked not quite like our hands, but they looked like pieces of rope that had infinite stretchability. And what they could do is they could stretch these out and actually use it like a grasper and grasp anything of any size and then bring it down. And what these people you see at the bottom would be doing is they would have another machine similar in size to the robot that was levitating. And then the robot would come down and put it on this device, and then the device would go wherever the people wanted it to. They would actually be able to control it by just talking to it or simply doing telepathy on it. That is, giving it a mental command. Because all the devices on this ship were attuned to the fact that all the personnel on this ship were telepathic. Because fully conscious beings, one of the energies that you have, one of your capabilities, is to be telepathic with each other and with everything around you. So these being fully conscious beings, they were like that. One of the things I loved to do after looking at the cargo hold for a while was to go to one of the recreation rooms, which was usually near where the cargo centers were. And to go in there and be able to interact with these incredible beings. And they were incredible beings. The women were in mid 6 foot or slightly taller. The men were all around 7 feet tall. They were incredible beings because they had this huge light around them. You could just feel this energy around them. And they were so incredibly open. I learned incredible things, amazing things about Syrian culture and how rituals were done between one clan or another, or even how the different clans on the ship interacted with one another. So I found out all kinds of information that Washta and his group of teachers never taught me. And I think they allowed me to do this because they knew that this would add to my education about how a galactic society worked. Because when I was sitting there or just observing, I was watching galactic society working. Even when they were relaxing with each other, they were talking shop, so to speak. So it was wonderful to watch, and I enjoyed it immensely. And I hated every time you could possibly imagine that I had to leave and go back to Earth, because this was like the most incredible place that I could ever see. The technology, the ship. I mean, even when you were by yourself, you could talk to the ship, and you didn't have to open your mouth. It was incredible. I enjoyed this place incredibly a lot. Now, these ships, whether they're Pleiadian or Sirian or Arcturian, are above us and are around our planet. Now, not only do these command ships operate in our atmosphere, and then these interstellar Sirian ships, which I've just described you, operate. And one of the things I want to do in a later tape is have a whole tape where I just talk about the Sirian mothership, because it is an incredible device, and I want you to understand the joy of my childhood when I was there, because it was just unbelievable, unbelievable, wondrous. So let's look at some of the scout ships, the human scout ships that are part of the vast fleet that is coming for first contact. Now, the first illustration of that we're going to look at is called Pleiadian scout ship. Now, this is an older type scout ship. However, it has the traditional shape that most Pleiadian ships have. That is, it has a field emitter on the top. It has a crew cabin and a foil and a power system, the propulsion system below it, and they usually are between 15 to 60 feet in diameter. Now, this older scout ship is really well suited to use in Earth's atmosphere, since most of the Pleiadian star nations that are part of the Pleiadian Star League have atmospheres very similar to us. Their ships are wonderfully able to adapt themselves to our atmosphere. And they decided to use this particular ship that you're looking at here in the Pleiadian scout ship illustration for one purpose: to monitor our atmosphere, and then its second purpose, to serve as liaison for ferrying personnel to and from inner Earth. Now, another old ship being used as part of the fleet comes from the Andromedan Confederation. And this ship is even older than the Pleiadian one. The Pleiadian one is thousands of years old. This one is actually tens of thousands of years old, and was actually discontinued as part of their fleet and just kept mothballed, so to speak, about 1,000 years ago. Now, what they had discovered was this ship, of all their ships that they had access to in their inventory, whether mothballed or in active duty, was the one that had the most ability for upper atmosphere research. They really felt that it was perfect for this. So this ship is used by Andromedan science teams because it is, as I said, very maneuverable in its atmosphere. Another thing they discovered was that it's perfect for deep ocean research. So they've also used it for Earth's deep ocean areas. Now, if you look at the ship, it's slightly different. It still has the same type of crew cabin. It has a much bigger field plasma director, and we'll explain that. And then the center part, which we're calling the flight foil. Both the Pleiadian and the Andromedan ships have this flight foil system, and then the propulsion system underneath. These ships, as I said, are mostly used in the atmosphere for checking atmosphere, ferrying people to inner Earth, or else checking the deep oceans. This is its basic use. There's another ship that is used more by the Andromedans, which I didn't have here, and then another third kind, which we're going to have next, which is the so-called plasma ship. And these are rarely used, but they are testing them right now. In the first place they tested them were in Argentina and Mexico and a few parts of Europe and Asia. But most of the pictures that people have of this ship are from Mexico. Now, the Andromedans, because they are master scientists, looked at the whole problem of lower atmospheric research. Because it involves things like jets and similar that were not little hostile to them, etc. And they wanted a ship that could do this with a minimum amount of interference from people, especially those governmental people that have air forces and stuff like that. So they came up with the next illustration, the Andromedan plasma ship. So let's look at that. Now this ship is unique because it has a plasmoid field around it. Now those of you wondering what a plasma is, most scientists will tell you that a plasma is the fourth state of matter. In other words, the other three states are solids, liquids, gases, and then superheated gases, which they call plasmas. Now these plasmas are really beyond just being superheated gases. What they are living beings. They're living entities. So what has happened is that it puts four balls, which are the plasma generators, around the four aspects of the ship, divides it into four sectors around the 360 degrees. These generators are created within the field. This is what makes it very high technology. The reason why they do that and how they're able to create that field is with these generators. Now, how does this operate? The generator is light, as we were just explaining. So what happens is the ship itself, which is lenticular, which you see in the middle, creates the generators. It just manifests them. And we won't go into the process of how it manifests it. We'll do that some other time. And then what it does is it puts a plasma field around it. Now what this field allows it to do is to actually step through the different levels of how realities operate. Now, realities can be looked upon as a flux, which is the grid of the reality, then the reality itself. And the fluxes are basically interacting with one another. They're like a huge river of creation, of physicality. And there's branches of it. Each reality goes into these branches. And these branches are set up in dimensions. Now in our dimension, which is our planet, Earth, and the solar system, there's this grid around it. And this grid extends to the planet itself. So here's how it operates. If you increase your frequencies up to the flux, you disappear. But just in that level between reaching the flux and on our reality, there's another land. So what the plasmoid ship does is it operates in that netherland. So no matter where it goes, the flux and that netherland follows it. So the result is it can look at times like a ghost ship. You can see through it. And they do this because this makes this impervious to any kind of interference. So this makes the ship the perfect ship for using near urban areas, and also for doing all kinds of research involved with, let's say, going into a mountain, through a mountain, and out. And so they've been doing this a lot. So from this plasma ship, the Andromedans are able to constantly monitor the entire planet in unique ways by bringing probes down that can actually go through and check them out. Now, once the Andromedans brought in their plasmoid ship, both the Pleiadians and the Sirians decided to take use of that technology and enlarge upon how their ships were put together. Now, what I'm going to show you here is the new type Sirian scout ship. Now, if you look at the Sirian scout ship, you see it's a ball. Now, the old type were approximately 100 feet in diameter. Now, the Andromedan concept was to create a ship that was plasmoid because of their science. The Sirians and the Arcturians created ships, as well as the Orions, which we'll get into next, created ships where they bolstered the field. So, like the older Sirian scout ships, this ship is round. Its size has just been tripled from 100 to 300 feet. Its capacity from 5 or 9, which was normally carried in the ship, to 15. Now, all these ships have the same basic aspects of their propulsion. They have a field direct emitter, which is, in this case, is a ring antenna around the top of the ship, which is just a redesigned field plasma director, as we've said, and a more powerful propulsion system, and then more powerful field emitters to strengthen the ship's propulsion system. Now, let's look at the ability of these ships. Let's say one of these ships runs into a difficulty on the planet's atmosphere and it needs to do something. It can either go to the interstellar mothership or the command ship, or if it is caught in some way where it feels it can't do that, it can go up to the flux level that we've just been describing, the flux of the reality, redirect its coordinates, and go directly home. Now for a Pleiadian ship, this takes about 7 minutes, and for a Sirian ship, this takes about 3 minutes. 2.5 minutes for the Sirian ship to set up the coordinates in the flux, and then 30 seconds for the trip. Now, another version of how this is put together is the Orion Scout ship. Now, this ship is 40 feet in diameter. Now, the important point are the different parts. Here, 8 field directional emitters are found at the top of the craft, and 16 field propulsion field emitters are found around the side. And on the bottom are the field generator emission controllers, which you see in the different colors, and the propulsion system proper. And what we're going to do is explain that. But remember how it changes colors. You see yellows and oranges and blues in combination all around the circle, forming the 16 beam controllers. Now let's look at this Orion Scout ship so you can get a better idea of what it's all about. On the top part of the ship, as you see, is a passenger and crew cabin. Like the Pleiadian ship, it carries roughly 9 people in it. Now these are involved in a crew of no more than 3 or 4, and the rest are just mission specialists or passengers, depending upon the mission. So the ship operates in a very special way, which we will be describing. What I want you to get an idea of is remembering at all times the 3 parts: the propulsion system on the bottom, the field emitters or the foil in the middle, and then the field directional emitters on top. It's very important that you understand these 3 parts, because when we go through propulsion, which we're going to be doing next, you can see this whole process again. And this is the next diagram, which is called the Arcturian multipurpose ship. Even though the Arcturians are not human per se, what they are the main groups that ferry people that are part of the process of creating the Galactic Federation medical teams. Now remember, we were talking about the 3-step process. The first part of this process were the motherships themselves, the command ships, and that's the lenticular Arcturian mothership that you saw. The second level are these, which is the Arcturian multi-purpose ship. Now these ships are going to be used for 2 basic purposes. The first purpose is to help the Galactic Federation medical teams, as we just explained. The second purpose is a lot of these ships are going to be used to ferry people, in other words, personnel from the Federation during first contact. So let's look once again at the ship, and you'll notice once again at the top, directional field emitter, crew cabin, propulsion system, and foil in the middle. Now these 3 things point the basic aspects of the propulsion system. Now on our next diagram, which is called ship propulsion system, we can look at this whole process and now start breaking it down and understand how it operates. Now, what you have here is a 6-part system. The first part is the field generator. The second part is the beam controller and beam generator. Then the third part is the field emitters or the foils. Then there's an energy rod and then a field direction emitter. And then the last part, the 6th part, are the actual plasmas themselves. Now let's look at this to understand the process of how this works. In the beginning, there is multidimensional light. This light works to create all of physicality. It has infinite amounts of energy. What the field generator does is it provides a system to step this energy down. And it does this using a magnetic system. Now, in Earth's concept, you would have to use an actual magnet. In their case, they use light magnets. What these are actually projections of magnetic fields that are produced without magnets. And they can do this simply by creating what are simply called reality potentials. And we'll get into that in another tape sometime. If you look at the illustration, you will see that these virtual magnets, which are found in the field generator, act like a special step-down transformer and convert this invisible super high frequency light into a usable form of light. This light then goes into as a beam, which has all the properties of these multidimensional fields. So it's really like a scalar wave, because it has the ability to operate in this reality and many others simultaneously. So what happens is these waves then go into what is called the beam generator. And they ride along the beam generator. Now at each end of the beam generator, going around up to 16 of these, are what are called beam controllers. This is how it operates. The beams go out and they hit the beam controller. The beam controller then sends them back. It's almost like a responder. It sends them back toward the core point, and then it completes its path. So you have these waves moving in and out, and they keep going forth, and you have this pattern occurring, going on like this. And it goes all the way around. If you could see an animation of it, you would see these beams moving forth, and they continue moving around. And what happens is this creates an energy field. As this happens, it's also creating this energy. So what happens is, as the field happens, it now goes up the next section, which is called the energy rod. So it's going up and down the energy rod as it's doing this. So as what's being created is an energy wave pattern is being created. Now, when it goes up and down the energy rod itself, it creates the inner plasma wave. And this is the inertialist wave. How does this happen? The inertialist wave happens because what happens is each one of us has within us molecules and atoms that are vibrating at a certain frequency. Each one of us also has around us an electrical field operating and vibrating at a certain frequency, as well as all the objects on the ship. What this field does is it entrains the fields. So you create no longer separate acceleration and motion patterns. They're all put together. And this creates a unified field. So no longer when the ship moves do you move with the ship plus your own motion. You now move only with the ship's own motion. So you do not sense the ship's motion because you feel it just like you're part of it. An example of that is being on Earth. The same kind of feel is created by our planet. So even though the planet is moving at an immense amount of speed around a huge star, you don't feel it. And this is the reason why these ships can do 90-degree turns or accelerate from 0 to 2,000 miles an hour, or from 200 miles an hour to 6,000 miles an hour, and you don't feel it at all. So this inertial field is created as this energy rod's going up and down. Now the next aspect is the field direction, the emitter. Now the emitter takes this energy field and moves the field outward and creates a wave. And this wave is then goes all the way down below the beam controller and the beam generator at the bottom of the ship. So now you have the outer pattern, which is the wave going along. Now, how does it move? At certain times in the ship's direction, the navigational computer on board the ship will tell the beam emitter to move more of the energy of the beam in a certain direction. So it propagates a directional field. As a directional field happens, it pulls the ship along with it. So what happens is it's almost like a surfer on board a wave. And this is really what we have to remember, is that, one, the ship's producing a propulsion system of immense energies. Each one of these field generators, to give you an idea, is producing, if it were an electricity, it's producing over 1 million to 1 billion watts of power. In other words, one ship is producing more power than could operate a small city, or in the case of a couple billion watts, operating a city almost the size of a large metropolis like Chicago, or London, or New York City, or Buenos Aires, or Manila. Some huge amount of power. This is just in one ship, all the way up to the larger command ships. That's why I'm saying 1 million to billions of watts. First diagram on this is called Ship's Motion Explained, Part 1. Now, as we said, there's this inertialess field. That's the blue field of plasma around the ship. The second part is the wave, which is this pinkish magenta field. And that's the wave around it, and that's the propulsion wave that we're talking about. Every so often, it will either create a direction or a speed by the energy it puts out. And that's this direction of wave propagation. That's the ocean process you see there. So remember, the ship rides above the propulsion wave and appears to surf the light wave, because this is a beam of light. This effect produces a motion similar to that of a falling leaf. In other words, if you've ever noticed an oak leaf or a maple leaf fall off a tree in the wind, it will do this motion. Now, not only does the ship normally operate in deep interstellar space like that, let's put a ship now in the atmosphere of a planet. How does it operate then? What it does is, it understands that the gravity wave of a planet, in other words, the gravity of every planet, has points of concentration. So this might be looked upon almost like with a leaf, something that make it go faster or blow it away completely. So it adjusts to this. So it has its own natural resonance, and it adjusts that to the resonance of the planet. As a result, by adjusting that, it can move up or down or through any planet atmosphere. So this is important for us to understand, that this motion operates that way. Now, not only does that motion operate in that way, it also has another aspect, and that is seen in Ship's Motion Explained, Part 2, which is the next illustration in this 3-part series of ship's motion. Now, remember we were explaining about this river of flux. Now let's look at this in a little more detailed way. How does this work? Now, we've just talked about the inertialess field. That is a constant because the ship needs to maintain a unified field so that everything in the ship operates according to the basic atmosphere of the ship. In other words, the locale of the ship. So the ship has that going. Now, let's say the ship wants to move from point A to point B and wants to move a great distance very quickly and doesn't want to go through the atmosphere of the planet. So how does it do that? Okay, this is how it does it. As I explained, there's this grid around your reality. This grid is called the flux of the reality, or the reality's flux. You can use either term, it's both accurate. Now, this grid has a frequency. Now, what do? You take that wave, that directional wave, and you increase its frequency. What does that do? It does two things. First of all, it gets the plasma field of the entire ship vibrating at a faster level. As it does this, it raises its frequency up. And it starts moving into the frequency resonance pattern of the flux. Once it gets there, it becomes with the flux, because when you create the proper sympathetic resonance, you become one with whatever you are resonating with. That's the nature of how these fluxes operate. So you're now in the flux. Now you have an infinite amount of places you can move. You can either move to another reality, and there's infinite amounts of those, or if you want to stay within this reality, you can move to another location. Well, how do you do that? Every point in this grid, in this reality, is a location point. So by setting up a computer that has mapped the entire locations, you can move to another point. You just set your coordinates to that other point. Once the coordinates are set, when you lower yourself down to the reality frequency, you will automatically zip over to that spot. That's how a ship can disappear in one part of the sky and seconds later appear in the other one, because you have to remember, in flux, the time, sequential time aspects of this reality don't exist. So it's infinite. So you can do basically a bilocation. As you're fading in this point over here, you're appearing over here. So it seems like you disappeared over here and appear over here instantaneously. That's how ships can do that. It's the same concept of how they operate to also move from one part of space to another part of space. Using this, it's no more than a matter of minutes that you can move from here to the Pleiades, to Orion, or way over into the other side of the galaxy if you want to, or into another galaxy. This is why this propulsion system is so unique. And also why this technology is our future, because our future is to have this technology. And the interesting thing is, remember the Orion ship. The Orion ship is unique because its shape was used not only by our various members of the Galactic Federation from Orion, but also by the former dark forces from Orion. And more primitive aspects of this shape were given to our own secret governments who have craft that look very similar to the Orion scout ship. We've talked about how ships move. Now let's talk about how ships cloak. What happens is you move the energy that we've just described to the flux of reality. But you don't quite do it. It's kind of like almost into the next reality and not quite. And when you reach that energy, you disappear. And you become one, you become invisible, because, as I said, as you reach the flux reality, or the reality flux, you cease to be a part of that system. Yet, because you're not quite in the flux, you can see everything in it. So people could even walk through you, fly through you. You're like a ghost. Ghosts actually are pieces of matter that are sitting right at the edge of the reality flux. And that's how the ships cloak. Ships Motion Explained, Part 3. In it, it simply says, as we've been saying, the ship's plasma field is inertialess, which means that all objects within the ship's plasma field possess a unified inertia. And this has to be emphasized right now, because what it means is that if you are in a ship, and let's say it does a maneuver like that, which is an aircraft is almost impossible, if you have a glass of water sitting on the desk or on a table next to you, the water won't even move. Whereas if it was in an aircraft, because of the change in energy potential, which has to be then expressed or manifested by the water would then slosh, because more energy would have been given to it, and it would be at a higher energy state, and it would move to recreate its homeostasis point, and then the water would move and flow over the glass and spill over the place. This point is very, very important for us to understand. This is why these ships can do all these maneuvers. And I've now explained to you how they can move from one point to the other. So, in summary, how these ships work then remembers these three parts. The energy-producing fields, the field directional aspects, and finally, the wave propagation system. And we've explained to you all the different parts in it. Now let's look at how this technology can be transferred from the Galactic Federation to ourselves, because as I said, our future is the first contact and creating a galactic society. And this requires that we have access to all kinds of incredible technologies. The transfer of technology. So as I've said, this technology is our future. So how is this technology going to be transferred to us so we can use it to help create our galactic society? Now, at present, a great deal of technology has been transferred by former dark star nations to your secret governments. What has happened over the last few decades is that a great deal of technology involving ships like the Orion scout ship that we alluded to, and other technologies. Now, a number of major Earth governments in the period just before World War II, during World War II, and after it, developed their own forms of this technology. This was especially done in Germany and the United States and a few other nations. These technologies have been enhanced in the post-World War II period, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, by the development of time travel and teleportation technologies. This again by Earth's many secret governments. The mission of the Galactic Federation is to transfer the next levels of these technologies during and after the mass landings by the Galactic Federation's first contact personnel. Now, how will this be done? First of all, what we have done is contacted many of the governments on this planet. That's what the Galactic Federation has done, and told them about the fact that they know about this technology and that they exist. To prepare for this as well, the Galactic Federation has been instructing certain groups on your planet that are helping the Galactic Federation to announce its existence and its benevolence. This process has allowed the Galactic Federation to assist many in preparing for the coming first contact. First contact has to be looked upon as a three-step procedure. First of all, is the Galactic Federation itself. This aspect is helping the spiritual hierarchy oversee the changes in our own physical, spiritual, and mental selves and how we are integrating all those together and to create a fully conscious being. The second part of this procedure is our own technologies and those aspects that have greatly helped us to create a situation on this planet allowing for our fully conscious selves to come to the fore and complete this procedure. The final aspect is a great amalgam step, when the Federation itself and those involved in the procedures to help us to become fully conscious beings get together and create the actual interaction of first contact. First contact is an incredible procedure. Some of the ships that you have seen, and we'll be talking about many others in upcoming videos, and as I said, one that will be particularly on one subject, which is my experiences in the Syrian mothership and what the technology that I encountered was. All of this is part of an incredible procedure allowing all of us on this planet to become fully conscious and create a galactic society. Consciousness requires assistance and aid from all. We are very close to this contact. So what we have done today is begin to give you an idea of the Galactic Federation ships, some of their missions, and how they operate, and how they move through the atmosphere and through space. We have to understand that the distances between the stars with this technology is not measured in years or in centuries, but instead is measured in minutes. In many cases, quite a few minutes to 10 minutes at the most. This is how far away this technology places the Galactic Federation from ourselves. It proves that the isolation that we now exist in is close to ending. Thank you for being a part of this video. Today we have looked at the the ships of the Galactic Federation of Light. And we have seen how they have come here to be a part of a vast first contact mission. They are here as part of the divine spiritual hierarchy's intervention into Earth's affairs. This intervention is bringing all of us, each and every one of us, into full consciousness and helping us to create our galactic society. They have come here not to rescue us, but to aid in this great procedure under divine supervision. So at night, when you see a star that twinkles and seems to have different colors coming from it, it is one of these great ships. So say hello in your own way before they can telepathically hear you. And know deep in your heart that these benevolent beings have come from all across the galaxy to see you and help in this great process. And so with that, I say, aloha and salamat ja.